Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Julio Godinez, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar, Delivering Testing as a Service in Cloud-Based Environments, brought to you by Tricentis. We have a great webinar for you today, but before we get started, I need to go through some housekeeping announcements. Today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any part of the program, you will be able to access the recording for on-demand viewing. We will be sending out a link to access the webinar on demand, or you can visit devops.com/webinars. We want to hear from you, so please feel free to send in your questions at any time throughout the program by using the Q&A tab. We also encourage discussion by using the chat tab, so let us know your thoughts or just say a quick hello. Finally, stick around until the end because we are doing a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards, so stay tuned to see if you're a winner. And finally, joining me today is Harit Patel, Product Manager at Tricentis, and Jared Grayson, Solutions Architect, also at Tricentis. And with that, I'm going to put myself on mute, turn off my camera, and let you begin.
Thanks to the DevOps.com team for having us. Today, we're going to be talking about digital integration. I am Harit Patel, part of the product team at Tricentis, and I'm joined today by Jared Grayson, who is one of our most senior solution architects at Tricentis.
Thanks, Harit. Very excited to be here.
Amazing. So with that, let's dive into today's topic. We're going to be covering key considerations for delivering testing as a service in cloud-based delivery environments. Digital integration is necessary and a catalyst as you start to introduce new SaaS-based tools in your organization.
Yeah, and so these tools that we'll be talking about today are expecting that we're leveraging these event-based and open source API-driven integrations that we'll cover in both the presentation as well as a short demonstration here at the end.
Yeah, and that's right, Jared. The ability to connect these tools in an automated way is critical for visibility and collaboration. The integration of tools with an open architecture, the consideration that we are recommending is how we're going to connect and orchestrate this in a really succinct way with a focus on quality.
Yeah, and webhooks and APIs are catalysts for these digital integrations, which are necessary as we move towards these cloud-based development and delivery tools and environments. So in the demonstration here in just a bit, I'm going to be showing an example of some of these orchestrations and workflows, leveraging the Tricentis Qtest platform and Azure DevOps. And just to note, this is simply an example that we're going to run through today, but these same concepts and use cases can be supported regardless of the underlying platform or tool or technology. Really, the only prerequisite is that these solutions have the ability to make and receive APIs and webhooks to start to automate many of the processes and eliminate communication gaps between toolings and teams.
So before we dive in, let's get clear on what we mean by testing as a service. First off, yes, we know that testing as a service has traditionally meant outsourcing your testing teams and its responsibilities to a third party. But this is a model that's harder to do in faster, more agile sprints and in DevOps models where we see quality and testing becoming more automated, and there's also a shared responsibility amongst many teams. However, for this purpose today, we do mean as a service in the cloud, a managed, scalable, and performant platform that's self-service for end users, whether they're testers or developers, that let them focus on using their unique skill sets and their skills to build business value. It's the as a service we usually associate with SaaS or IaaS that makes up the cloud. As a service has been steadily taking over the stack and the toolchain for many years. A decade ago, many organizations began shutting down their data centers in favor of IaaS from providers like AWS or Azure. While many enterprises today are still managing their own Jenkins servers, managed CI/CD, and automation solutions like Circle CI and Azure DevOps. When I say DevOps, I mean Azure DevOps pipelines, which are growing in popularity across the board. And more recently, there's been a push from vendors like GitHub and Coder to provide IDEs as a managed service in the cloud, replacing all those local machines that we used to use in the past. The incredible challenge that testing and quality teams have is to account for all these changes throughout the stack and across all the toolings in the delivery pipeline. So let's dive a little deeper into the considerations and focus on what we need to do around these testing models and how your organization continues to shift its use towards cloud infrastructure, services, and tool sets. So we've broken this down into 4 categories: teams and culture, application and architecture, infrastructure and services, and the last, automation and delivery. Each of these are a huge topic in their own respect. But today, we'll go through what changes we see for testing as organizations move more towards the cloud and how testing teams can address them. So first, collaboration tools. Collaboration tools are critical in this environment. Whoever's using Slack and Zoom more than ever, everyone is using Slack and Zoom. When you're a part of a team developing software, it's critical that you have tools in place to manage processes asynchronously and to serve as a single source of truth. Working this way is also a major culture change for development and testing teams. So you might ask, what are some of the ways you can make culture change a positive one and also stay efficient and on time? First, choose the test and dev solutions for integrations. You can build your own, and many people do. But if you can reduce that, you reduce your maintenance burden. We'd also like a little more time to maintain all the actual test cases, right? Either way, you need to find ways for your tools to talk to each other so you can find things easily and see exactly where you are with every aspect of your project. For dev and test tools specifically, you want to find integrations that enable your testers to be involved as early as the planning and the requirement stage, and that allows the whole delivery team to understand dev test process for every requirement. And maybe I'm a bit biased, but test management is also very important as a way to avoid siloed knowledge or spending time scripting something that might already exist. If you could search a team or company-wide test case libraries, think about all the time and all the effort we would save if we could find redundancies in our processes and in our test case libraries. You also need to be aware of directionality of syncs. Which systems are the source of truth, for example? Real-time two-way integration via webhooks is important and is what's we use today, versus what we used in the past, which was scheduled syncs, which can be unreliable and sometimes, honestly, really slow. So with that, let's talk about infrastructure and services. With the public cloud, we now have access to VMs, storage, networking, or databases from the cloud providers. But in return for that ease, we give up some control over configuration of the services our applications primarily depend on. Testing teams now need greater awareness of the machines, the regions, and the managed services that are being used by your applications. A change which is different, but now these are the underlying dependencies that are required to do with your new rounds of testing. This trade-off also means that there are new requirements for how infrastructure and data are being accessed. Lastly, to serve teams and customers on a global scale, businesses have option to run on distributed systems with different workloads running in different regions or zones all across the world, kind of bringing together the globalness of the entire organization. However, this presents a new set of challenges for networking and performance for more complex applications. Teams, culture, and collaboration may actually be more important here and that than infrastructure itself. Essentially, the testing team needs more awareness of the cloud provider for the services that are being utilized on a day-to-day basis. They'll also need to extend or tighten collaboration with cloud operation teams to understand new needs for your security, your regression, and your performance testing in general. And then it comes down to your actual applications. So applications are payloads for using the cloud in the first place. So it is, of course, making sense that we would need to alter how we architect and package these applications. To take advantage of the cloud and its ability to quickly spin up machines, many applications are being refactored into microservices and even microservice frontends so they can scale faster. Microservices have many other implications. More requests being services are often through APIs, and more frequent updates to some of these microservices requires a lot more testing. This eventually adds to the need and testing for data integrity, for API testing and performance testing, as well as overall automation to keep up with all these frequent updates. We know this can be a huge topic, worthy of many, many working sessions, no matter wherever you are. But at a high level, you can treat this change in architecture as a chance to increase test automation and introduce new testing strategies in closer concert with development. With more frequent changes to infrastructure, services, and applications themselves, moving to the cloud often drives more frequent testing, along with many different kinds of testing in collaboration with many different teams. That's a lot. It's a lot more tools, a lot more test cases, and a lot more testing data to keep track of. Centralized test management and orchestration will become super critical to making test automation work at scale and maintain the delivery velocity that we all drive and stream for. So overall, the bottom line here is that the cloud is driving dynamic changes across our distributed systems in every level of the stack and throughout the entire development cycle. Successful delivery requires increased collaboration, helped along by well-governed syncs between systems of record of development, testing, and increasingly, delivery and cloud operations. Having distributed resources available means we need to plan, architect, and test for efficient networking and messaging between all of them altogether. Lastly, doing all of this is effectively at scale requires a lot more automation, a lot more orchestration for common events, and especially within our CI/CD pipelines. So with that, let's actually touch on a use case. We'll cover a specific use case for one of our customers, Specsavers. What they were trying to do was they're trying to modernize their dev, testing, and delivery to support digital operating model and omnichannel approaches. The testing challenge was that they had localized test automation suites across the global teams, which meant that they had to do a lot of these automated tests that they spent a lot of time maintaining. Because it wasn't stored centrally, sharing and hands-offs were really quite difficult. However, it limited them from running all the tests that they could. They were also struggling with limited visibility into all these automated tests and also seeing the results for these automated tests, primarily because there was not a single source of truth. They eventually adopted Qtest and integrated a BDD approach, and let's see what that helped them with. Qtest enabled them to create a streamlined test automation strategy that focuses on the riskiest areas of the release first, and then shifting testing to the API layer, which has both improved test coverage and reduced the number of test scripts that they maintain on a day-to-day basis. They're now using parsers in Qtest Pulse to send the results of automated tests that were built using Serenity and other frameworks directly back into Qtest, their primary test management solution. These tests are run in DevOps pipelines or Azure DevOps pipelines, so it's critical that everyone has access to pass-fail results and can diagnose these tests pretty quickly. These results are then published to Slack, Teams, email, and also on shareable Qtest dashboards. With this new model, Specsavers has been able to achieve a high level of test coverage in the pipeline with a high speed of execution that supports rapid versioning and releasing pretty quickly. For some of these critical tests, they have also been able to reduce testing times from 4 days down to just 16 minutes, while also making sure they had more than 92% coverage. And that's just phenomenal. Bringing everything together allowed them to address their use case and solve their problems to move forward. So with that, I want to share that we are proud to say Tricentis Qtest supports Azure DevOps boards. We have the tools and the mechanisms in place to allow you to synchronize requirements, defects, and details from Azure DevOps boards into Qtest. And it also allows testers to directly open bugs in Azure DevOps boards based on the bugs logged in Qtest. This helps them keep their development as testing teams in sync and leverages event-driven updates using webhooks in both the products. We continue to plan and enhance this extension, but we're ready to show how it works out of the box for standard Qtest deployments. The integration heavily relies and uses our Qtest Pulse application, which has been in the market for quite some time. Qtest Pulse is an advanced rules and workflow orchestration engine that leverages webhooks, API calls, and even Node.js scripts while using additional components to integrate any application to establish full traceability between requirements and their corresponding test cases, and ultimately the results, to further simplify their overall CI/CD and DevOps orchestrations. However, we're super excited to share that with you. And let me switch over and bring Jared back on to show you, run through some of these demos. Jared, off to you.
Great, thanks, Harit. So let's walk through an example of how we could implement this in a real world scenario. So as teams start to operate in disparate applications and toolings, as collaboration and communication become much more of a focus and a necessity, the integration between these tool chains and automating many of these previously manual tasks are only going to be heightened and more important as we move towards this testing as a service model. So I'm going to walk through two demo examples today, and I'm going to be using Qtest as the core unified test management platform and Azure DevOps as both our backlog management and CI pipeline orchestration tool. So two use cases. And just to clarify, this can also be achieved with any tooling inside of your DevOps toolchain, assuming that those tools have access to make and receive API calls and webhooks. So let's kind of outline the structure of what we're going to actually show in the products. So a common end-to-end flow would begin with something like code being checked in. That's going to then trigger my pipeline build. As tests are executed as part of that automated pipeline, I want to centralize those test results into my core test management platform, associate those tests to requirements, log defects against failed tests into my development backlog, and potentially notify additional teams or groups via a chat ops tool, for example, in a Microsoft Teams channel. So at any stage in this end-to-end flow, if these processes are manual, they could easily be automated with common services in these cloud-based applications. So for example, webhooks could be used to trigger a pipeline based on a code commit. That could then hit an inbound webhook that's managed in Pulse to leverage an API to create my test case, pull the GitHub repo to grab the associated requirement IDs, automatically link those requirements to my test cases, make an API call to my backlog management tool to log a defect into Jira or ADO boards or others, and invoke a ChatOps webhook to send a real-time event notification to my development organization. And so one of the key takeaways here is that as you start to move towards these testing as a service models and applications, the ability to orchestrate and manage these workflows can all be handled via Qtest Pulse. So instead of having to develop your own microservices or solutions for this orchestration, Pulse comes pre-built with webhooks and coded actions to truly customize and automate many of these tasks. The second example that we're going to run through, and as Harit mentioned, is to highlight how this could work between Qtest and Azure DevOps boards. Right. So the workflow that we're going to dive into is, as a business analyst or developer creates a new work item or user story in Azure DevOps, that is going to leverage the ADO webhooks to hit an incoming webhook in Pulse that's going to reflect that work item or user story in my test management platform, notify my testing team that a new requirement is available and ready to be tested against, and that test cases need to be linked to cover that user story. And subsequently, as a quality engineer comes across tests that have failed and they log defects in their test management system, how could Pulse orchestrate and reflect that defect in my backlog so that developers can update that defect and changes flow back into Qtest? And again, ensuring real-time collaboration by also incorporating a chat ops tool into this orchestration. So with that, we're going to hop into my demo environment, and I'll walk through this in real time. So the first use case that we're going to start with here is actually the Azure DevOps boards and Qtest manager integration. So I'm going to start within my ADO project, in which I have my boards environments configured. And this is a very simple example of an ADO Scrum project where I'm managing different work items within my backlog. So I happen to be using work items of type user story, but any custom work item type would work as well. But in essence, when an end user creates a new user story inside of ADO boards, and I'll give it a quick title and a short description. Behind the scenes, ADO is going to emit a webhook event that sends a notification to Pulse. Pulse is then going to orchestrate the integration and the workflow and reflect these changes in Qtest. And we'll just add a little emoji just for fun. Right, so any fields, if I were to update the story points, once I click save, I, as a business analyst, can operate within my primary tool that's purpose fit for requirement and backlog management. I could also come into existing issues or work item types and make any updates and have the ability to stay right within the Azure DevOps platform. So we'll just add a little heart, change the description, click save. Now I, as a quality assurance engineer that primarily operate within inside of my unified test management system, don't have to leave my core platform to see all of the updates and changes driven by my development team. Right, so not only can I view all of the information as created in ADO, I can very easily hyperlink and open that issue in the system of record if need be, and also see any changes that may have been made to existing issues. So not only the new update, but the area here of the description that has changed. And I can now use this information that's updated in real time to drive my testing activities, right? So easily hop into ADO if needed. And then within my test management platform, very quickly and easily be able to associate and manage my test coverage and traceability between my testing assets, whether those are manual or automated, and my work items or user stories. Subsequently, if I come across a test that has failed, and that could be a manual test failure or, in a moment, an automated test that's failed that's integrated by my pipeline, right within my unified test management platform, I can create a defect that's associated with my failed test case, type in my description that may include steps to reproduce for my development counterparts. But as soon as I create and save this artifact, Qtest Manager also supports outbound webhooks that are being sent to Pulse. Pulse is then orchestrating the creation of that item inside of my Azure DevOps project. So if we refresh this list, and I need to remember in what order this has come in, but here we can see up at the top, the new defect was created right within my backlog that was originally logged inside of my test management solution. Right, so we'll dive in here in just a moment. And one more thing to point out as well is I can easily hyperlink back to that object in Qtest. And there's many different ways to configure and customize this integration if need be. Similar to the requirements workflow, again, once my developers take ownership of this bug and make any updates, all of those changes and updates within my Agile planning tool automatically reflect here within inside of my test management system. So let's talk about the other use case before we dig into the details of, well, how are all of these automated events being orchestrated behind the scenes? So if we head over to my second Azure DevOps project where I have an automated pipeline configured. If we go into my pipeline configuration, and I'm simply going to manually run this pipeline, but again, as we talked about before, this could automatically be triggered based on some type of external event like a git commit or another Pulse action. But when my pipeline is executing, there are many different stages and steps that will be invoked as part of that pipeline execution. But at any stage or step where automated tests are being ran, whether those are open source scripts like the Cucumber example that I have here, Serenity tests, as in the SpecFlows example, packaged automation tools like Tricentis, Tosca, or others, custom automation frameworks. Once I have tests execution results available, and here in my pipeline, you can see that my tests are being ran, the execution results can automatically be sent to Qtest Pulse in real time so that those results can then be stored in my test management platform or sent to any other systems. So if I go to my Qtest project here where I have my pipeline integrated, I, as a QA engineer, I don't necessarily have to have access to my build tool or necessarily be the individual who's responsible for running those automated tests, but I now have a centralized view of all quality results that are executed as part of my project. So in this case, along with any other manual test, I have 3 automated tests. I also have a orchestrated event that automatically links my automated test to my requirements, as we just saw. And this is going to track execution results over a period of time. So I run this pipeline daily. I can see that this specific automated test with its individual steps has ran a total of 8 times now. And for any test that may not be passing, as we showed before, right within a central platform, the ability to log a defect that's going to update in Azure DevOps boards, or in this example that I can log directly into Jira as a custom issue type or issue type of bug as well. Right, so all of these workflows and communication and collaboration are now happening automatically and programmatically behind the scenes, and Pulse is what is orchestrating all of these events. So what you'll notice is once I refresh my screen, Pulse has a nice summary of what are all of these actions or rules that are being ran as part of my configured integration workflow. Right, so today I've sent some Microsoft Teams messages. I've created some defects in ADO. We've done some requirement syncage. We've also synced those defect changes from ADO back into Qtest. And this is primarily driven through what we call triggers, which in essence is an HTTP callback URL or a webhook URL that an external system can interact with. So in this example, ADO boards is going to use this trigger or webhook to send information to Qtest, where Pulse is then going to perform some action that's very extensible and can truly be customized to fit your specific integration needs and use cases. So behind the scenes, what's happening is we're searching, does a requirement for that ADO work item already exist? If not, create and reflect that same requirement inside of my Qtest project. And then to determine which action is performed when a certain trigger or webhook is invoked, we simply drag and drop those and marry them as a rule. And I could also asynchronously execute multiple actions anytime a single trigger is invoked. And so if we go to my second example here, where we ran our ADO pipeline, right, results are being uploaded and parsed, and I'm actually, in this case, sending messages to Slack. But the workflows are all going to be configured and managed and orchestrated here. So parsing automated test results like Cucumber or TestNG or Robot or others, posting those results to Qtest, automatically linking those tests to requirements, automatically logging defects for failed tests, are all centrally managed and orchestrated here in Pulse. And before I forget, an example of a custom message that could be sent to a team that operates within Microsoft Teams or Slack or some other chat ops tool. And very quickly to speak to what changes you may need to make in your upstream application. Solutions like Azure DevOps and many other modern web-based digital tools not only have APIs, but also have the ability to configure webhooks, which are more of an event-based, performant, and real-time method for transmitting data between applications, right? So by simply creating a webhook inside of ADO, I can determine, well, what event needs to trigger a notification? Well, in this case, anytime that a work item is created for my ADO project of type, let's go user story, I need to notify an endpoint or a callback webhook URL, the URL which we're going to post information to. So if we go to the example that I already have set up, what we'll notice here is ADO needs a service or an endpoint to send this information to. That's exactly what Qtest Pulse is doing here. We're generating these triggers so that external systems can not only start events, but have somewhere to send that to. Same thing from a Qtest perspective, right? Qtest Manager also supports webhooks such that anytime that a defect is submitted in my project, we send certain information and metadata to a URL. It's going to be a Pulse URL that's listening for that event to occur to then perform some action, such as also reflect that information back in my Azure DevOps project. So yep, that covers what we were hoping to demonstrate today. Hopefully this starts to unveil and allows teams to think through, well, what types of integrations or workflows or processes could we automate? How can we centralize all of this information into a single core set of tools and a platform and allow for this enhanced collaboration and visibility? So with that, I'll kick it back over to Harit, but thank you everyone for your time.
Yeah, and thank you, Jared. That was really insightful. But now let's open it up for questions, and would love to answer some questions from the attendees.
Excellent. Yes. So we do have a few questions here. First question here. Is a standalone version available? Can I download it and run it from a standard PC and not on the internet?
Yeah, sure, I can take that. So it's a good question. Qtest is available as something that can be supported in the cloud and also in on-premises infrastructure. If you're specifically talking about tests that can be run, we do support automation agents that could be running on standard PC or Mac devices, and that is tied into our Qtest launch. But with Qtest Pulse, we primarily work with cloud or internet-based systems.
Excellent. Next question. How would you suggest we use more frequent application changes as a way to revisit test automation?
Good question. So for this, I believe that we first need to figure out a way to get executive approval for all your or some of your tools first. And then once we have some sort of proper alignment in the ones that we are looking to use as options, we can get a good understanding of which ones we can manage and increase testing in or add automation. Easily replacing these tools allows you to show that our automations are robust and allows you to see the resilience of our code to support more scenarios. And the variations in the flux can be used to argue why we need a more robust test automation system, which will help you kind of revisit test automation.
All right, next question. What other CI/CD tools does Qtest integrate with?
Great question as well. So as we showed, there are some CI and CD tools that Jared mentioned that we integrate with. Some include Circle CI, Jenkins, pipelines in Azure are really good examples. We can technically tie into any of these or other tools via the Pulse tool, which you just demoed. So if it has supports APIs or webhooks, you're quite easily able to integrate with those and standardize based on event-based listeners, which we call triggers, and also additional actions that could be added on top of that.
Excellent. Next question. Does Qtest support an integration with Jira?
Oh, yes, it does. So Qtest does support an integration with Jira. What we showed today was Azure DevOps boards, but we do have a really strong and robust integration with Jira. It's really fine-grained. It supports two-way sync. You're able to add defects and requirements and bugs, epics, stories, all of that, and bring them into Qtest and vice versa, and move them back. You're able to selectively choose other issue types as well. So it provides a really robust integration with Jira, and a lot of our customers today use that as well.
Great, great. And the last question I see here, what test automation framework integrations are available for Qtest Pulse?
Great question as well. This slightly ties to what I just mentioned before, but what Jared walked through for us today, it showed the beauty of Pulse and how it can support any application that we didn't talk about today as well. We have an open source community via our GitHub pages, where you can also have a lot more examples. It has a bunch of different automations and frameworks, parsers already posted there. And we do also have details and stuff posted from our customers on there, so you can build on some of those. These are pre-configured examples, and they can be easily leveraged. For example, for chat ops tools, you could say Slack. For integrations for Azure DevOps boards, we just talked about that. And there are additional examples of events and pipeline integrations to be able to run tests and get back results and file bugs. So you should be able to find that in our GitHub community.
Excellent. Well, I'm not seeing any more questions from the audience right now, but in the meantime, I do want to remind everybody that today's webinar has been recorded. So if you missed any or all of the webinar, you will be able to watch it again. We will be sending an email with a link to access the webinar on demand, and you can also find it on devops.com. Just look in the on-demand section, and you can find it there. I did mention at the beginning of the program that we were going to announce 4 Amazon gift card winners. And our gift card winners today are Ken L. Congratulations, Ken. Cosmin S. Congratulations. Krasimir D. And finally, Marcus T. So congratulations to all our winners. We'll be reaching out to you via email instructions for claiming your Amazon gift card. So please check your inbox. And if you don't see it there, check your spam folder. Harit and Jared, thank you very much for taking the time to put this presentation together. And I'd also like to thank the audience for their time and engagement. This is Julio Godinez signing off until next time. Be well.